Hey everyone, this story begins with a decision that would change everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and legacy. Before the truth was revealed, before respect was earned or denied, there was a test quietly unfolding beneath polite smiles and shallow courtesies. Take a second to like, subscribe, and stay with me through this journey of awakening, power, and reckoning. Welcome to Black Queen Dominion. I had learned early in life that wealth could open doors, but character decided who deserved to walk through them. Success had come to me quietly, not through inheritance or rescue, but through discipline, strategy, and an unshakable belief in my own worth. I carried my achievements with grace, never allowing them to announce me before my presence did. That restraint was not humility alone. It was protection. Power revealed too early invited manipulation. When I met my fiancé, love felt uncomplicated. His affection appeared sincere, his ambition steady, his admiration comforting. He knew I was independent, educated, and capable, but he did not know the full scope of what I had built. That omission was intentional. I believed love should recognize the woman before the wealth. As our relationship deepened and the promise of marriage emerged, another reality approached with it: his family. Their reputation preceded them. They were known for appearances, status conversations, and unspoken hierarchies. Respect, I was told, was something earned in their world, often measured in visible success and social leverage. I listened without judgment, but curiosity settled in. I needed to know whether their values aligned with mine, not through confrontation but through observation. I decided to test them not out of malice but out of clarity. I chose simplicity. I spoke lightly about my work, framed my life as modest, and dressed without signal or symbol. I did not lie, I merely withheld. There is power in silence when people are eager to define you for themselves. The version of me they met was quiet, reserved, and intentionally unremarkable. The first visit revealed everything I needed to begin understanding. From the moment I arrived, I felt weighed not as a person but as a calculation. Eyes assessed fabric instead of posture, tone instead of substance. Politeness existed, but warmth was absent. Courtesy was performed, not extended. I noticed how interest waned when my answers did not elevate their expectations. I noticed how curiosity dissolved when my background did not entertain their assumptions. Their home was grand, yet the atmosphere was cold. Hospitality was selective, not generous. I moved through the space like an outsider allowed to exist but not invited to belong. My presence was tolerated, not embraced. I observed how attention shifted away from me toward more impressive topics, how my contributions were acknowledged briefly and then forgotten. What struck me most was not cruelty but indifference. I was not insulted outright. I was minimized. I was treated as temporary, replaceable, and inconsequential. Their energy suggested that I was not the kind of woman who altered futures or elevated legacies. They assumed my role was peripheral, decorative at best. Through it all, I remained composed. I carried myself with dignity, because character does not change with circumstance. I listened more than I spoke, learning the rhythm of their judgments. They valued optics, not integrity. They respected wealth, not wisdom. They believed power announced itself loudly, never considering that true power often whispers. As the evening unfolded, I recognized the test had already begun to deliver results. No one asked about my dreams. No one cared about my values. No one attempted to understand the woman beyond the surface they had quickly dismissed. Their failure was subtle but complete. They did not see me because they were never looking. Leaving that night, I felt neither anger nor sadness. I felt confirmation. Love had brought me to the door, but discernment showed me what waited inside. I understood then that marriage does not join two people alone. It entangles histories, beliefs, and unspoken expectations. If I was to step into that future, I needed to know exactly who would be standing beside me, and who would be watching silently from the shadows. The mask of modesty had done its job. It had revealed the truth without confrontation, without accusation. It had exposed the quiet prejudice that thrives in polished rooms. As I prepared for what came next, I knew the test was far from over. The real reckoning would not be about their judgment of me, but about my decision regarding them. And as that realization settled, the path ahead became both clearer and more dangerous, setting the stage for the next chapter of this awakening. The days following that first visit were filled with reflection rather than reaction. I replayed every moment not with the intention of magnifying offense, but with the purpose of understanding patterns. Patterns reveal truths that individual moments try to conceal. What I saw was consistent and undeniable. Their perception of my worth was conditional, shaped entirely by what they believed I possessed, not who I was. I continued the test, allowing time and proximity to deepen their assumptions. Subsequent encounters followed the same unspoken script. I was acknowledged politely, seated conveniently, and included minimally. Conversations flowed around me rather than through me. My presence never altered the temperature of the room. I was background, not centerpiece. What fascinated me was how comfortable they were in their conclusions. There was no curiosity to verify, no humility to question. They had decided who I was based on what I did not display. In their world, invisibility was synonymous with insignificance. They did not consider that restraint could be intentional or that silence could be strategic. Meanwhile, my fiancé existed between two realities. He experienced my depth privately, yet seemed unaware of how his family reduced me publicly. Whether through denial or normalization, he did not intervene. His silence became its own message. Love, I realized, is not only measured by affection but by protection. And protection was absent. I watched how their expectations surfaced subtly. Their future plans did not include me as an equal contributor. Their assumptions framed me as dependent, adaptable, and secondary. They spoke of legacy without considering my capacity to build one. In their vision, I would enter their world quietly, benefiting from association rather than bringing strength of my own. That misunderstanding was profound. I had built my life with precision and resilience. I knew the weight of responsibility, the cost of leadership, and the discipline of long-term vision. I had navigated spaces far more complex than their curated gatherings. Yet in their eyes, I was small because I had chosen not to announce myself. The longer the test continued, the clearer the outcome became. Respect, in their world, was transactional. It required proof before principle. They valued what could be leveraged, not what could be trusted. Their failure was not personal, it was cultural. But cultural failures still carry consequences. I began to understand that revealing the truth would disrupt more than perceptions. It would challenge hierarchies, expose insecurities, and force accountability. Power, when revealed unexpectedly, unsettles those who rely on control. I had to decide whether revelation was necessary, or whether withdrawal was the wiser path. This was no longer about acceptance. It was about alignment. Could I build a future alongside people who only valued me once they knew my worth in numbers and influence? Could I respect those who ignored my humanity until it benefited them? These questions demanded honesty, not hope. As the test reached its natural conclusion, I felt a shift within myself. The mask no longer felt heavy. It felt complete. I had seen enough to know that whatever came next would redefine every relationship involved. The calm before revelation held its breath, waiting. The stage was set not for confrontation but for consequence. And in the next chapter, the truth would begin to surface, not through words, but through undeniable reality. By the time the third chapter of this journey began, the test had already concluded in my heart. What remained was not uncertainty, but intention. I was no longer observing to decide, I was preparing to act. There is a quiet moment that arrives when a woman realizes she has outgrown the room she is standing in. That moment does not announce itself with anger or tears. It arrives with calm, with clarity, and with an unshakable sense of direction. The opportunity for truth to surface did not come through confrontation. It came through circumstance. An event connected to my professional world overlapped with my personal life, creating an unavoidable intersection. I did not orchestrate it for drama. I allowed reality to exist without concealment. When masks fall naturally, the impact is far more powerful than when they are ripped away. The gathering was larger than usual, filled with people whose presence reflected achievement rather than appearance. I entered the space without changing anything about myself except one thing. I stopped minimizing. I spoke freely, moved confidently, and allowed my name to be associated with my work openly. There was no announcement, no grand reveal, only alignment between who I was and how I showed up. The shift was immediate, even if unspoken. Recognition traveled faster than gossip ever could. The same people who once looked past me now looked twice. Curiosity replaced indifference. Interest replaced dismissal. The room adjusted its posture around me not because I demanded it but because truth commands attention without effort. What struck me most was not the reaction itself but the contrast. The difference between how I was treated when I was perceived as insignificant versus how I was treated once my accomplishments were known was undeniable. Respect in their eyes had never been about character. It had always been about currency, influence, and proximity to power. As information connected itself quietly, I watched realization spread. The same family who once overlooked me now recalculated me. Their expressions did not carry shame, they carried surprise. Surprise that the woman they had categorized so quickly did not fit the box they had built for her. Surprise that restraint had concealed strength they never thought to question. I felt no satisfaction in this moment, only confirmation. This was never about proving myself. I had already proven myself long before I met them. This was about witnessing how quickly value was reassigned once perception shifted. It was about seeing how conditional their respect truly was. My fiancé's response was more complex. Pride surfaced alongside discomfort. The truth forced him to confront his own silence, his own assumptions, and his own role in allowing me to be diminished. Love, when tested by truth, either deepens or fractures. I could feel the tension between admiration and insecurity forming beneath the surface. What followed were subtle attempts at revision. Stories were retold as if interest had always existed. Moments of neglect were softened through selective memory. The past was being rewritten quietly, not to honor me but to preserve their self-image. Accountability was absent, replaced by convenient amnesia. I did not confront them. I did not correct the narrative. I allowed their discomfort to exist without rescue. Growth does not occur when people are shielded from their own behavior. Silence once again became my tool. This time it was not a mask but a mirror. Internally, a decision solidified. I understood now that acceptance offered after revelation is not the same as acceptance offered in truth. Respect given only when status is confirmed is not respect at all. It is negotiation. And I had no interest in negotiating my worth. The truth had entered the room, and with it came a reckoning that no one had prepared for. The test was no longer about them failing me. It was about whether I was willing to succeed without them. As the evening ended and the energy settled, I felt lighter, not heavier. Clarity has that effect. I knew that the next step would not be dramatic but decisive. The power dynamic had shifted permanently and there was no returning to ignorance. The foundation of every relationship involved had been exposed. And in the next chapter, choices would be made that could not be undone. By the time this chapter began, the noise around me had grown louder, but my inner world had never been quieter. Clarity does that. Once truth reveals itself fully, confusion no longer has a place to hide. I was no longer reacting to what had happened, I was responding to what it meant. And meaning, once understood, demands action. The days after the revelation felt different. Every interaction carried weight. Every gesture was layered with intention. The family who once barely acknowledged my presence now moved with careful politeness, as if unsure which version of me they were allowed to engage. Their energy shifted from dismissive to cautious, from indifferent to calculated. Respect had arrived late and it showed. I observed how quickly behavior changed when power dynamics were altered. Invitations became warmer. Opinions were suddenly requested. My presence was no longer optional, it was strategic. Yet beneath the surface, nothing fundamental had transformed. Their values had not evolved. Only their awareness of my position had. That distinction mattered more than anything else. My fiancé struggled in this new reality. The woman he loved had always been strong, but now that strength was visible to everyone. What once felt safe in privacy now felt threatening in public. He spoke with pride, yet his actions revealed hesitation. The imbalance between who I was becoming and who he was prepared to stand beside grew more apparent each day. I began to recognize a truth that many women are taught to ignore. Love is not enough when alignment is missing. Affection cannot compensate for a lack of respect. Commitment cannot survive without shared values. And silence when protection is required is not neutrality, it is a choice. The family's attempts to integrate me into their vision of the future revealed their expectations clearly. They imagined access, not partnership. They saw opportunity, not union. In their minds, my success elevated their image, not their responsibility. I was being repositioned, not appreciated. What they did not understand was that my power had never been about proximity. It had been built on autonomy. I did not need to belong to their world to be complete. I had created my own, brick by brick, without permission or validation. And now that they could see it, they wanted to benefit from it without reckoning with how they had treated me when they believed I had nothing to offer. That realization sharpened something inside me. I reflected deeply on what marriage would mean in this context. Marriage is not an escape. It is an expansion. It magnifies what already exists. If respect was conditional now, it would remain conditional later. If my voice was optional now, it would be negotiable later. If my worth had to be proven now, it would always be measured. I understood then that the test had not only been for them. It had been for me. To see whether I would compromise clarity for comfort. To see whether I would accept delayed respect in exchange for stability. To see whether I would shrink to preserve harmony. The answer came without struggle. I chose myself. That choice did not come with anger or bitterness. It came with dignity. I did not need to accuse or explain excessively. The truth was evident in behavior, not words. I began to create distance not as punishment but as protection. Boundaries replaced expectations. Observation replaced hope. The family sensed the shift, though they could not name it. Access diminished. Influence faded. Their recalculations no longer included me. And for the first time I felt no urge to correct or reassure. Detachment is a form of self-respect when attachment costs you your identity. My fiancé felt the change most deeply. The woman he thought he knew had evolved, not suddenly but visibly. And evolution can be unsettling to those who benefited from your previous silence. He was forced to confront whether he was prepared to meet me where I stood, not where he was comfortable. This chapter was not about endings. It was about decisions. Decisions made quietly, firmly, and without regret. I was no longer testing anyone. I was choosing alignment over approval, peace over performance, and sovereignty over sentiment. As this phase closed, I knew the final chapter would not be about revenge. It would be about resolution. About what happens when a woman refuses to beg for belonging and instead builds a future where she is honored fully. And with that certainty, I stepped forward, ready for the final reckoning that would seal this journey once and for all. It began with stillness. A stillness that only comes when a woman has made peace with her decision and no longer needs external validation to confirm it. By the time everything reached its conclusion, there was nothing left to prove, explain, or negotiate. The truth had already spoken louder than any declaration ever could. Walking away was not an act of defeat. It was an act of completion. I did not leave empty-handed, I left empowered. I carried with me the clarity earned through observation, the strength sharpened through restraint, and the wisdom gained by allowing people to reveal themselves fully. Closure does not always arrive through apologies. Sometimes it arrives through acceptance of what will never change. The relationship ended not with blame but with recognition. Recognition that love without protection is vulnerability. Recognition that admiration without advocacy is hollow. Recognition that partnership requires alignment, not admiration from a distance. I did not need to justify my departure. The imbalance spoke for itself. The family's response unfolded exactly as expected. Confusion followed by disbelief, then quiet attempts at damage control. The version of me they had underestimated no longer required their approval, and that reality unsettled them. Loss is felt most deeply when control disappears. They were left not with anger but with the discomfort of missed opportunity. There was no satisfaction in their regret, only confirmation of the decision. Growth often looks like loss to those who cannot benefit from your evolution. I understood then that walking away was not just for me, but for the future I refused to compromise. I had protected a legacy that had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with self-respect. In the months that followed, my life expanded effortlessly. Opportunities aligned with intention. Connections formed from mutual respect rather than convenience. I moved through spaces where my presence was not questioned but valued. Where my voice was not tolerated but sought. Where my worth was not measured but assumed. The lesson remained clear and unshakable. People who fail you in your perceived weakness do not deserve you in your proven strength. Anyone who requires evidence of your value before offering respect is not worthy of proximity. And any love that asks you to shrink is not love at all. I no longer disguised myself for comfort. I no longer softened my success to preserve fragile egos. I no longer tested people to see who they were. I simply observed and chose accordingly. Discernment replaced defense. Boundaries replaced explanations. This story was never about pretending to be poor. It was about revealing character. It was about understanding that how people treat you when they believe you have nothing says everything about who they are when you have everything. The test was never unfair. It was honest. As I stood firmly in my own dominion, I realized that queens do not beg for seats at tables built on exclusion. They build their own tables and decide who is worthy of joining them. Power does not need permission. Respect does not need negotiation. And self-worth does not require validation. If there is one truth this journey leaves behind, it is this. Never confuse access with acceptance and never trade your crown for comfort. The right people will honor you in every season, not just the ones where your value is obvious. And with that, this chapter closes, not with revenge but with rain.